comrades, what's up? We're here to talk about Fairy Tail Volume 18, picking up with Orasian Sace in the battle for Nirvana. So, last we left, we had the Battle of the Celestial Spirits and Ares. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Not Ares, the Ram one. Is that Ares? No. I don't remember. Anyway, she just got summoned, and Leo is having a hard time. And then we see that the handsome boy from the Handsome Guild, he recognizes that as Karen's celestial spirit. Apparently, he had some sort of relationship with her, as he's like really upset that she was killed. And he realizes, or this woman talks about how she got the key because she killed Karen. And so Leo and this other gentleman are like super upset about the whole situation. And then Lucy's about to send Leo back because she doesn't want him fighting the Ram. But Leo was like, no, I must stay and I must fight. I'm trying to see if it says anything. Anyway, so then they start fighting, and then Lucy gets like super upset about the whole situation, and the angel lady just like does not give two fucks. And then she summons Callium, which is this like crazy weapon thing, and blasts through both spirits, destroying, sending Ares. Yeah, okay, so Ares and Leo back to the spirit realm, and Lucy gets like super mad because it's like, how dare you attack your own spirit and whatnot. And then she's like, I don't give a fuck about that. So then Lucy summons a Taurus, and then the angel lady summons Gemini to look like Lucy and is able to defeat Taurus because of that. Gemini then attacks Lucy directly, and the angel lady's laughing and having a good time. Lucy keeps yelling at her and talking about how she needs to release Ares, and how she needs to let Ares and Lucy and Loki be together, Leo be together, and how she's a terrible celestial spirit because she doesn't care about people and whatnot. And then finally, Angel like commands Gemini to kill Lucy, but then Gemini's like, no, I hear something. And Gemini starts to cry because Lucy loves celestial spirits from the bottom of her heart, and she refuses. So they like take off and drop the weapon, and then Angel's like super fucking mad. At that point, the blonde handsome boy comes and grabs Lucy from behind by her neck, and then Angel starts laughing. He's like, he's lost his mind. And then the guy says, I'm going to download once and only once the knowledge of hyper magic. And Lucy's like, what? And then he does like some crazy thing, and then all this like celestial magic starts like gathering, and Lucy starts saying all this crazy stuff, talking about the all 88 stars of heaven and whatnot. And then she casts Urano Meteoria and just blasts the shit out of Angel. And then the blonde guy like falls back, and she's like, what the fuck just happened? Because she totally lost it while he was doing that. And he's like, huh? And then she notices like, so Happy's still sitting over there in his crystal, and Natsu's he's tied to the what do you call it, a raft. And so she's going to check on Natsu, and then the angel lady shows back up with the Callium thing, and she's like losing it, and she's like, I can't lose. Orasian saying can't lose. I'll get you. If I'm going to die, you're going to die too. And she does some blast at Lucy, and then at the last second, the blast like curves around Lucy, probably because Callium was like, fuck you. I don't want to do this because of the celestial spirit bond. And then Angel dies. And Lucy grabs Natsu by the hand to pull him off the raft, but then she gets dragged along by the raft, and they're floating along and all this stuff. We go back to Brian, who's like the head of the Orasian Sace, and he like touches his face, and he's like, one of us died. They got Angel. And then he looks up and he's like, that's okay, the extinction of light will happen soon. Meanwhile, over with Urza, she's charging to where Jalil's at, thinking about all their memories, everything that's happened in the past. We then jump over to Jura, who's the wizard saint, and he's with we find out his name later is Richard, but he's the money guy, and he's so happy, and he talks about how Nirvana affects your heart, but because he loves money and he's like very kind of neutral about the evil versus the good, he just wanted more money, that it was very easy for Nirvana to change his personality because he was never like that bad of a person in the first place. It kind of just like pushed him over the edge in the other direction when he did like the old switcheroo. We see Midnight. She beats up the rest of the Blue Pegasus guys. And then Wendy is like hiding out on the mountain, talking about how she ran away and stuff. And then, what's her name? Her little cat friend is like, tell me about this Jalil guy. And so Wendy finally tells us like her relation to Jalil, and it's a pretty straightforward story. It's just that when she was younger and after her dragon disappeared, she was wandering along, and then Jalil found her and took her on a journey. And then at some point he said something about anima and took her to Kaot Sith. No, it's not Kaot Sith. Kaot Shelter. Kaot Shelter, which is the guild she's in, so that she could stay with them and be safe. And so she thanks Jalil for this the whole time. Moving back over to Urza, she walks up to like this tower being raised into the sky, and we see her and Jalil standing looking at each other. And then the snake bro is over there as well, and he's watching. And then Jalil says, Urza, that's your name. That's all I know. Who's Urza? And then Urza's like, Jalil? And he starts like grabbing his head. And he's like, I don't remember anything. I don't remember shit. Like, all I remember is the name Urza. He's like kind of freaking out. And then Urza, and the snake guy's watching. And she's like, I'm Urza. Come to me. And he does something to like blast at her. Like, don't come any closer, get away from me. And she tells him that his name's Jalil and tells him all his past crimes. And he's like, oh, I can never make up for all the terrible things I've done. And she's like, that's right, you got to do this thing. Meanwhile, Lucy and Natsu like wake up. They were on that, they like landed on shore. And Lucy's wearing like a exceedingly sexy outfit. And she's like, huh? And then Virgo's there and she's like, I went and got it from the spirit world. And then she looks over at Natsu and Virgo's like, I got him a matching I made him a matching outfit so that you guys, because you guys are lovers. And Lucy's like, what? No, we're not. And then she's like, are you not? And then they like, Natsu and Lucy talk for a second. And then Virgo's like, so are you going to do it now? And she's like, stop being crazy. And so then she bounces out of there. At that point, Sherry shows up and she looks super mad. And she's talking about Leon being killed and how it's all their fault and how whatever. And then Grace shows up and knocks her down and holds her down. And she's like, I will get revenge. I will exact revenge on the death of Leon. And then Leon walks up and he's like, I'm not dead. And she's like, oh, then she passes out. I'm so happy. Thank goodness. And then we see this like crazy little spirit thing leave her body. So I guess she was just possessed by evil spirits because she's also on like the verge of being good and evil. So good stuff. Cobra Man kind of walks up towards Urza. She pretty much ignores him. They're still talking about Nirvana and what's going on. And we find out that Jalil, he's like, oh yeah, I woke up and I was thinking about Nirvana and I decided I got to destroy it. So I went in there and put like a self-destruction square on there. And then the Cobra guy like freaks out and runs inside. He's like, you did. And then we find out Jalil put a self-destruction square on himself. So he's going to die as well. And then Urza gets super mad and is like yelling at him, telling him he's a coward, telling him he needs to take that square off so that he can face justice and that he needs to live and all this stuff. At that juncture, Brian rolls up, the head of Racing Sace, and he's like, oh, you fools. Like, I'm the one who taught Jalil the self-destruction square in the first place. I invented it back when I was a member of like the Wizard Research Academy or whatever, so I can easily get rid of it. And then, so he does. He gets rid of it from Nirvana, and then he gets rid of it on Jalil. Does he? You put your self-destruction actually cancel code. I don't know. I don't think he does. Anyway, so then he takes over. Once he gets rid of that, he takes over Nirvana and like tells it to grow super big, and it becomes this giant like spider walking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, there's like 7 or 8 legs, moving like city. And he's like laughing and talking about how it's finally time and all this stuff. And then Urza and Jalil got pulled up on top of this thing as it was like growing out of the ground, and she's holding on to him, keeping him alive. And he's like, and she tells him it's his duty to stay alive. And then we see the rest, and he's like, well, we're lost. There's nothing we can do. It's all, for nothing. And then she's like, no, Fairy Tail will never give up. And we see Jura and Richard hanging on. We see Leon and Sherry watching from below. And we see the rest of Fairy Tail, Natsu, Gray, and Lucy climbing up. And we see Sherry like flying over. So like everybody's coming to fight on top of the city and fight for freedom and whatnot. So everyone's merging up here at this juncture. And then we also see the Blue Pegasus boss, and he just says like men a couple times. And that's the end of him for this volume. Natsu gets super sick because he's riding on a vehicle, and they're like, this isn't a vehicle, it's like a creature. And he's like, no, I don't see it like that, I see it like this. And Lucy's like, stop being so hard-headed. And then Natsu falls off because he's sick, and then Happy grabs him and is flying around. And so he flies up, and he's about to attack Brian and Cobra Guy with like a fire blast as they're like celebrating their victory. And then he just starts blasting the city and trying to burn it to the ground. And so Cobra Guy uses his cobra to transform into like a flying cobra. And then they like fly after Natsu and Happy. And then for a couple of chapters here, we have a battle between the two of them. Meanwhile, Wendy and God, I can't remember her name, Clara or something. They're inside the city. Oh, Carla. I was close. They're in the city and they're working on trying to get to everybody else, and then she notices that the city is moving towards Chaos Shelter, and like, why is it moving there? Because it's going to use its Nirvana powers to transform the whole guild into like an evil guild, so Brian can have a bunch of minions and whatnot. Anyway, so the battle with Natsu and Cobra Man continues. Cobra Man can like hear the hearts, so he can understand what you want to do because your heart thinks it before you do it. And so they go back and forth and fight. Lucy and Gray meet up with Jura and Richard, and I think this is where he introduces himself as that, and they all talk about how he's had a change of heart and how they're going to work, and then the guy mentions that Brian's likely in the Central King's Hall because that's where he's controlling the tower and whatnot. And then Midnight, the son of Brian, he's like watching them, and he says something about like, I'm going to destroy you, there's no way you can beat my dad or whatnot. And so he hops down and does like a magical attack, but Richard like blocks it. And then he has a whole conversation about like, you guys go ahead, I can take care of this. Like he creates a hole to protect Lucy Gray and Jura. And he says all of Racy Say's powers are equal so that he'll be able to, he can fight this guy. He can fight Midnight by himself and he'll take it. And then they start battling shonen style. And this is where he says his name is Richard. Hot Eye was his like, Racy Say's name. And so Jura, Lucy, and Gray watch the battle. And then Natsu's back up in the sky. He's fighting, fight. We find out around here they have like some shonen anime battles. Eventually, Natsu just goes by pure instinct, right, like in Dragon Ball. And so he's able to get a bunch of punches and fights on this guy. And then we find out that this guy is not only like a snake wizard, he is also the cobra. He's also the poison dragon. And he's like, what? And then he talks more about being a cobra dragon poison dragon slayer, and that he's one of the new type of dragon slayers, just like Laxus, in that he was installed with like a lacrima that made him like a poison dragon slayer, and that he wasn't actually taught by like a dragon, right? And he talks about how he's so much better than Natsu, and he has like a poison breath and all this stuff. So Happy starts getting affected by the poison breath, and Natsu does too, but he keeps fighting. And then they talk about dragons and what it means to be a dragon and a dragon slayer, and Cobra, I think is that his name, just Cobra? He starts talking about how like the old time guys are weak and that there's no more dragons and whatnot. And then finally Happy's like about to pass out. And he's like, just drop me. Natsu tells him just to drop him. He's like, well, you can't just fight him. He's going to hear you. Or Natsu's like, just drop him. And so he drops him like right on top of Cobra. And then Cobra is like, oh no, he's doing some sort of magical blast in his heart that's going to hit everything around me, but I'll just attack him from behind. So he does like a maneuver to get behind Natsu. And then Natsu does like a dragon shout, like it just like decimates Cobra. Like he's like, his ears are like blown out and everyone can hear this like loud thing. And it sounds like a crazy monster. And Carla's like, oh, it's so loud. And then Wendy's like, Natsu. And everyone over the whole city can like hear this crazy thing. And it just sends Cobra crashing into the ground. And then he's like knocked out. I don't think he's dead because no one ever dies in these. And then Brian's like, holy fuck. Like, what kind of wizard is Natsu? And so then Natsu like crash lands after him and he's laying there being all tired and stuff. And Happy tries to help him, but he's kind of passed out. But Cobra's not dead yet. And he's like, that's the problem. You can't beat me. Your old generations are weak. And then he gets shot from behind and it's Brian. And he's like, enough. And he's like, what the fuck? Why'd you do this to me? And he's like, how dare you get defeated by this weakling? You got defeated by one person. There's no way you can be an official member of Oasis or Orasius Sace. All right. Yeah. And then Natsu's like, how can you do that to a friend? He's like, I have no friends. The power of Nirvana, I can make new friends. And then Natsu's like, you're just making puppets. And he's like, ooh, hoo, 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 hoo. And then we see Richard, and it looks like he beat Midnight. And Midnight's complaining about losing, and he says, I can't do this. My father would disown me. And then Richard notices Midnight trying to crawl his way back up, and he casts something like liquid ground attack on him. And he's like, today's the end of Aracian Sace. We then have Lucy, Gray, and then Brian, he grabs Natsu, who's kind of like knocked the fuck out, and starts dragging him away. And then he gets confronted by Jura, Gray, and Natsu, and then Natsu like bites his arm for having him let go, and he like falls back on the ground. And he's sick because not just the poison, but he's on like a moving vehicle, so he can't handle all that stuff. So I'm like, get up, you dumbass. And he's like, no. And the guy's like, you can't stop Nirvana, something. He's like, this city we're going to is the first thing we're going to do. We're going to attack Kayat Shelter. And then Jura gets like super mad, and he's like, "What? Tell us why. Like, what is your intention?" And the guy's like, "I don't tell you shit. I'm not going to say anything to you." And he's like, "You better tell me your intention right now." And then the guy's like laughing and like, "Oh fuck, what are you going to do, you fucking asshole?" And then Jura's like, he's like, "You annoy me." And then he blasts the shit out of him, like just like this crazy attack. And then Brian's like, "Holy shit!" And then Gray's like, "God damn!" Like, he's like, "Stand the fuck up and fight me." And so they're looking at each other, and then they get like a shonen anime standoff, and then they shonen anime. So Brian's using his like dark rondo crap, and then he like dark capriccio and all these attacks, and Jura's like just destroying his attacks like they're nothing, like reversing them, like sending him in different directions. He like plummets him with stone, and then Brian like breaks out And then Jorah's like, I've had enough, and he like blasts him one more time and knocks him like out. And then he walks up and he's like, why are you targeting Wendy's guild? And he's like, oh, I thought it'd be impossible to defeat me. And he starts talking about his son. And he's like, the rest is up to you. All 6 prayers vanish, then we're done. As long as there's 1 prayer left, something. And then someone's like, why are you saying such creepy things? At that point, Wendy's found everybody, and she comes running up. She's like, please, you got to help my guild. And she's like, oh, you got everybody. And Gray's like, yeah, the snake guy's over there as well. And it's like, cool, we should be able to stop this now. And then Carla rightfully is like, I don't like this. It seems really sketchy. And then Jorah's like, yeah, I have a lot of questions. So then they head over to like the King's Hall where the controls for the city supposedly are. And at that point, we switch over to Richard, who's walking up on Midnight, who's crashing the ground. And then Midnight hops back up and starts talking about like dreams. And he like blasts the shit out of Richard. And he's like, your magic can't touch me. And his wounds are completely healed. And he's like, I'm the strongest wizard. I'm even better than my father. And then Richard is like, oh, my prayer to see my brother. And he passes out. And then Brian, who's like fading out, he's like, oh, the 5th prayer has vanished. There's only 1 left. And at that point, everyone's like, wait a second. There's nothing here to like guide this city. Like, what the fuck's going on? Like, there's no controls at all. Meanwhile, Wendy heals Natsu from the poison. And then she's like, what's wrong with you? And then Happy tells her about his motion sickness, and then Wendy's like, oh, I got a way to fix that, and so she does. And so the Natsu's like, oh, I feel great, this is awesome, oh, I'm fine, thank you so much, Wendy, you cured me, you're the best, and I'm so happy. And he goes up and is like, yay, conjure up something, I want to write it now, I don't feel sick anymore. And she's like, no, leave me alone. This is not the time nor the place. They're like, how is this thing still moving? And then Wendy gets super upset because like, what are they going to do about the guild and what's going to happen? And like Midnight gets brought up at some point, and then Natsu's like, don't worry, Wendy, I'm going to stop it. And then we see Midnight right at the end of the volume, and he's like, Nirvana will never be stopped, not as long as I'm here. Dun, dun, dun. And that wraps up volume 18 of Fairy Tale. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, and we'll get to volume 19 in a couple weeks. So catch you guys later. Bye.